Chapter 25 Father Victor's Ordination. After having spent some time with Friar Victor exploring the closest places to where Victor would be stationed, Metropolitan Onesimus and Victor returned to St. Nicholas Monastery, and while there the whole assembly, composed almost entirely of catechumens, was invited, and almost anyone who wanted to spectate. Many people were there, including but not limited to Queen Inari, Blondie, officers of the Bureaus of Finance and Investigation, the two priests Onesimus originally sent to Victor's monastery with their families, but likely to get restationed after the ordination service, Todd and Vixie Reddington, Dixie, and Susan Yako with the Yako family. There were also personal enemies that hated Victor for different reasons, such as the priests of Okami Inari in their vestments, as a statement a second great burning of 1284 will not happen in their country, heads of Kitsune corporate conglomerates who saw Friar Victor's influence on the Kitsune youth to live more simply as a reason for their reduced profit margins, and deranged Tanuki sectarians who wanted to find any canon in an attempt to invalidate Victor's ordination because their internet personalities told them to do so, having even the most absurd theories that Friar Victor was a Freemason, Jew, pagan, atheist, communist, ecumenist, and a radical, God-hating feminist for letting his sister become empress. But things were continuing as normal until some of those people that hated Friar Victor and Metropolitan Onesimus started shouting racial slurs towards the bishop and to get out of their country. They eventually agitated the crowd so much that it almost turned into a physical confrontation. But before a fight could happen, the Fox Queen gave the hand signal to her protegens to grab the agitators by the neck and drag them out of the church. Then things continued as normal as if the agitators were never present. And eventually, the prayers of Friar Victor being ordained to the priesthood were beginning in the sight of the whole assembly. And with Metropolitan Onesimus' stole over Victor's head, the whole congregation shouted, Axios! As Friar Victor was officially ordained to the priesthood, even if Father Victor subjectively didn't feel worthy of his vocation. But nonetheless, out of obedience to his bishop, he accepted it, with Father Victor donning his new vestments for what he was about to do. Metropolitan Onesimus then stationed Father Victor at St. Nicholas Monastery, as his parish where St. Nicholas first taught him the ways of life, and with it would become the beginning of a new age of enlightenment to the Kitsune clan, even if Father Victor didn't realize it yet. After the service, after everything had occurred, Sozon Yako was about to return home until Inari noticed him with an elated heart and asked, Yako, is it really you? And seeing that he was seen for who he really was and couldn't lie, Sozun answered, Yes. Look, I understand if you don't want to come back or don't believe a word I say because of the way I treated you. But you're welcome back to live in my palace anytime. And I do enjoy your company. You're free to do as you will, but I'm genuinely happy you're not dead. That way I can truly say to your face that you don't owe me anything, and are free, and I mean it. Sozin then said with a snicker in his voice, I guess someone close to me has been a good influence on you. Inari stared intently at Yako, finding his willingness to tell her the truth despite her high position over him attractive, and not just finding him physically attractive either. Then she tried to suppress her feelings for him, thinking, It's not like I like it or anything, but baka. Then Inari said to Yako, As a matter of fact, my brother has been, and honestly, you and he are the reason I'm changing for the better. I have nothing more to say, so do whatever it is you are going to do today. Yako then approached Onesimus and asked, Onesimus, I understand I cannot become Victor's deacon because I have shed the blood of saints. But is there any way I can help Father Victor with his mission? How can I help him? Metropolitan Onesimus answered, You don't need to be clergy to serve the Lord or with a long-time friend. You can serve as you are, and Father Victor would know better than I do about what he needs. Thank you, and that I will do. And although Father Victor overheard this conversation, he did not feel comfortable telling Yako what to do, because he saw himself more as a servant than someone who lorded over other people. But at the same time, he understood that a life of service was something Sozin had always lived by, and loyalty to one's country, family, and heritage. In Sozin's country, since his baptism was the kingdom of God, and although he once executed the will of his old master Inari, now he desired to execute the will of Christ, in the world as one who serves. And since then, Sozin Yako, known colloquially as Sozin the Redeemed no Jitsune, would become in practice Father Victor's right paw-hand man, and a much-needed bridge between the church and the Yako clan, even more than the patriarch of the Yako clan himself, who was merely of 5 tails. A not-so-grand conspiracy. After the ordination of Father Victor and his enemies seeing that Queen Inari had not reacted with hostility towards it, they began to discuss among themselves about what to do about Father Victor. After all, for all her faults as the Fox Queen, Inari was still held in very high esteem among the general population, even after some of her faults became public. And even with most of the public didn't regard her as members of their pantheon, in which everyone who worshipped Okami Inari did, she was also a queen who very effectively maintained order and stability that enabled most of the general public to live their lives peacefully, without having to worry about being shot for wearing the wrong colored t-shirt. So, attacking her despite their suspicions that she was secretly turning away from her ritual duties as image of Inari would just be asking to have their intestines pulled out and hung by them. And it's not like they would get any help from Chief Executor Vixie, because Vixie had a close relationship with Father Victor as her mentor, and as the executor overseeing the region he lived in. And neither were half the heads of the corporate conglomerates on good terms with Vixie, and afraid that she may crack the law down on them more harshly if she discovered organized crime, which would mean the end of their business ventures and a long sentence in prison. They had reason to fear Chief Executor Vixie Reddington, because they saw from their own experience how she showed no fear towards corporate monopolies and didn't negotiate with economic terrorists. And being the intelligent business people these people were, they knew better than to make Vixie and Inari their personal enemy. Meanwhile, the other executors were indifferent to Father Victor because he didn't live in their jurisdiction and therefore someone that would not be their problem. There was also the issue that Father Victor was becoming popular among the general populace who were not aristocrats, even among those who were for the most part weren't Christians, but members of the cult of Okami Inari, and other spirits associated with different places and things. And the general population that were admirers of Father Victor loved him because they saw him as a true embodiment of the values that had been lost in their culture: honor, sincerity, and purity, as well as found it almost miraculous that his life could influence a real Nojitsune to change his ways. His message also very much resonated with most of the youth, who desired meaning and real purpose, being wage slaves in their lives, and all without involving violent riots or political revolutions. He was also known as a very wise and gentle person. Thus, it would be very difficult to slander him when even just the presence of a true Nine-Tails demands respect in Kitsune culture. and that in order to gain the ninth tail, a kitsune would need to have a pure heart. But perhaps, if it wasn't possible to deal with Father Victor directly, there might be another way to go about it indirectly. Target the people he loves and cares for. Zenko gets a job. With Zenko starting her new life in Whitetail, Kansas, she went around looking for a job. She already had plenty of ideas, but she needed help narrowing it down. So, she sat down with Buck Ringtail to help her figure it out. Buck then asked her, "So what is it you're going for? Money? Just to get by? Benefits? What do you feel like your priorities are?" Zenko answered, and not in her human disguise because neither Catherine nor Julius Whitetail was around. "Honestly, I'm just looking for a half-decent job so I can pay my bills and not be buried in a bloated bureaucracy and endless paperwork. At my last job, that was all there was to it, with it being really depressing. My boss was really stupid and unbearable. You could pay me the amount of money my sister has, and I would still say no to a job like that." Buck thought for a moment and asked, "Are you good at cooking and have good people skills?" Zenko's orange fox ears and 7 golden tails perked up as she answered, "Of course, I love being around people." "Well then, you may want to take a look at Edenthiel's bakery and around Bootleg Brewery's HR department, with them offering pretty good benefits." "Of course, I've heard about this lady named Edenthiel, and I want to meet her myself and see if she's the real deal around here." Zenko then used her kitsune illusion magic to look like a youthful 25-year-old human, dressed in classy clothes. Zenko and Buck then made their way to Edenthiel's bakery to find Edenthiel was about to leave. As for Edenthiel herself, her belly had a large bulge from the twin girls inside her, as Agron took over running her bakery for the time being. And although Zenko was excited to see Edenthiel, she noticed the tired expression on Edenthiel's face and decided that she would talk to Edenthiel later. So rather than visit Edenthiel, Zenko and Buck made their way towards Bootleg Brewery's customer service counter. Zenko then asked the lady behind the counter, "Do you know if there are any HR applications available? I'm new to this little town and I want to know what's available." The lady behind the counter answered, "Just hold on 1 second," as she went through the files on available positions for the company. The lady then faced Zenko and said, "We have a few positions available for our HR department. Let me print out the application if you want to apply to any of them." The lady printed out the application forms and handed them to Zenko. Zenko then thanked the lady for them and took them with her back to her small house to figure out what she wanted to do with them. Natalia then came over to Zenko's house and helped her cheat on nearly get a perfect response on the most well-paying positions on the application form. Zenko then turned in her application and in a few days got a call for an interview. And in the meantime, Zenko was practicing interview scenarios with Natalia, so when it came time to be hired, Julius Whitetail was very impressed with Zenko's responses and personal character, and hired her immediately. Then after getting hired, Zenko was put through her orientation, all without Julius Whitetail realizing she was secretly a kitsune. And once Zenko realized that she had nothing to do, that everyone was asleep, she decided to look at what was going on in the Kitsune clan with her newsfeed. And that's when she learned that her brother had been ordained a priest without her even knowing about it in advance. Then she felt sad because she couldn't be there to see it for herself, but was nonetheless happy for him. Did you know this? Ordination of Orthodox priests. In the Orthodox Church, in which the fictional Sulsudan Church is a part of, all legitimate priests are ordained by a bishop with apostolic succession, and remain under obedience to that bishop. And during the ordination service, when priest is ordained, the congregation shouts axios, which is Greek for worthy. It is also the standard practice for priests to have first been ordained to become a deacon, and have gone through multiple years of seminary. Thus, Father Victor being ordained without having gone first to seminary, and through the diaconate is a bit out of the ordinary, but it is not unheard of given that Father Victor is a monk and has essentially done most of the things a deacon would do, and during his monastic life have already been well versed in theology. It's also customary that sometimes monks are ordained to the priesthood by the local bishop if there are no viable priests available. There is also the requirement that anyone who has taken a human life cannot be ordained to the priesthood or any member of the clergy. Hence, Sozun Yako cannot be ordained to the diaconate as Father Victor's deacon. And as far as this goes, it doesn't matter if it was murder, self-defense, unintentional protection of other people, or in war, which was Yako's case. Deranged Tanuki sectarians. This is a reference to sectarian rigorist movements that pop up every now and again, where they essentially go full sola scriptura, but instead of the scriptures it ends up being canons removed from their context. Many of them eventually devolve into becoming schismatic sects or full-blown heretics, with notable examples from history including, but are not limited to, Donatists, Montanists, Tertullian, and more recently such as the Greek Old Calendarists, which schismed from the Orthodox Church over a calendar. A nod to personal experience of sectarianism. In writing The Deranged Tanuki Sectarians, the detail about the outlandish theories that conflict with the obvious reality is based on a real experience of sectarians who were converts to the Russian Orthodox Church outside Russia, Rokor, and a majority from uneducated Low Church Protestant backgrounds. Common things these sectarians did was accuse everyone they didn't like of being either a member of the United States Central Intelligence Agency or a Freemason, regardless of whether or not that was true. They were also, for whatever reason, racist towards Jews and acted as if Jews were the cause of all the world's problems, blamed the Jews for the Russian Revolution of 1917 and killing Tsar Nicholas II and being the cause of communism, despite the fact that the communists were openly atheists who were intent on destroying all religion and culture and history and replacing it with communism, and none of the leaders of the communist movement being Jews, and Jews having not supported socialism since the 1930s. And the sad part is that these sectarians act like this around real ethnic Jews who are practicing Orthodox Christians in their own churches. These sectarians also had the attitude that only Russian Orthodoxy is real Christianity and that all other jurisdictions, such as the Greeks, Antioch, and the Orthodox Church in America, OCA, are false churches against their own bishops' words, which all recognize the Greek, Antiochian, and OCA churches as legitimate churches and being in communion with them, with the only difference being the names as a holdover from a few decades ago when immigrants from many countries brought their jurisdictions with them from the old country.